Okay, thank you for your patience. We are back. I will entertain a motion to adjourn our executive session and reconvene the regular meeting.
I motion to adjourn our executive session and reconvene our regular meeting.
I second.
Thank you, Melissa and Tanya. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, motion carries. We are now reconvened into our regular meeting. We will continue our agenda items. That was 14B. We will move on. We did not have any items removed from the consent agenda, so we will skip over 15A and go to 15B, LESD plan for reopening 2021 with mitigation plan. I believe that is Superintendent Gunning presenting for us.
Madam President, members of the governing board, it is our recommendation that the board accept the LESD plan for reopening with mitigation plan embedded for the 2020-21 school year and authorize the superintendent to modify, alter, or change this plan as needed.
Okay, I will open the floor for questions, comments, or discussion to Jody on the reopening plan with the embedded mitigation plan or anything within. No questions, discussion? Okay. I will say, this is a long document. So for those of you that didn't, that are watching us here, that didn't go through it, it's really an informative document. It probably took a very long time to put together. So thank you very much to the staff for doing that and kind of walking through every single thing. I think, one thing I'd like to make clear, and I think Jody, you just said it, that while this document is, here in black and white, it still has the ability to change and for you to make those adjustments as necessary. I know there are some things in here that talk about, the different learning models or, when we come back together and what things are going to look like. We don't know everything clearly as we move forward and when we start to reopen and bring kids back on campus. So I'm hopeful that this will be a document that we can at least modify, not necessarily all the time, but, as necessary, because I think we're learning things every day and learning how to continue to mitigate risk with our staff. And when students come back on the campus, we'll do the same. So I didn't have any specific questions necessarily, but encourage everybody to read it and really understand what the district is working towards and some of the tough decisions that the staff has been up against trying to figure out how to make this a really good and safe reentry plan for both our staff and our students. No other questions or comments?
I do have one question.
Okay.
So we're going to approve this plan, and then Superintendent Gunning is going to take responsibility for updating this plan as we know more. Superintendent Gunning, how often will the board be getting updates on changes to this plan?
Well, it's going to be a live document on the internet because we have to post it per the executive order from the governor. So it's going to be up. So that's why it's so critical that we update it timely so that any parent or any staff member or you as any board member would see the accurate plan. So whenever we have to make a change, it's done instantly. We did, I believe, I think she had it noted. I think we did note it, like what the last date was of when it was updated, so that way you can always see. So.
And could I offer a suggestion potentially for Kim and for Jody, that if there are changes made to this plan, that they be included in our Friday updates, just as not that we wouldn't go online and review that, but we might not be able to understand what those changes are or whatever. So if they could just be highlighted quickly, nothing formalized, but just, what those changes are in the Friday update. And then we can go and look at them. That way you only have to alert us once a week in our normal updating schedule. And then I would assume we would be able to, as a board, discuss anything that we had comments or questions on in a future COVID-19 update, if there was anything we felt like we need to discuss in person. So, okay. Okay, well, I will move to approve the LESD plan for reopening for 2021 school year with mitigation plan as presented.
I will second.
Okay, any last comments, discussion on that? All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next, 15C, discussion and possible action on resolution to effectuate the requirements set forth in the governor's executive orders 2020-51, 2020-44, and 2020-41. Superintendent Gunning presenting this as well.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would approve the resolution per the attached memo as presented. This resolution provides the opportunity and guidance for me as the superintendent, as one of the components, is to be able to look at all of the information in consideration, such as the health department recommendations on when we reopen. And then at that point in time is when we bring those recommendations to you as a board, when it would be recommended that we reopen, and considering all information included at that time. With that being said, this would then negate the September 8th reopening date, since we would be looking at ongoing data on a weekly basis from our Arizona Department of Health and our Maricopa County Department of Health.
Okay, I will open the floor for comments and discussion about the resolution. I know we will have some comments about the school reopening and the DHS metrics, but is there any other concerns or questions about any other part of the resolution before we jump into that conversation? Okay, and just to clarify for those watching, there have been several executive orders that have come down from the governor. As you know, some of those are not typical things that we would do or normal course of business for the district. So this document gives Superintendent Gunning and her staff the ability to do what she needs to do to be in compliance with those executive orders and make sure that the district is doing everything with the regular practice protocols, procedures that were set forth in those orders, in the orders by the governor. Okay, well then I will open up discussion on the school reopening piece and the release of the AZDHS metrics and how that pertains to our district opening. As Jody said, this document would negate that September 8th date that we had previously discussed and approved prior to the metrics coming out. And that date would be replaced with a to be determined, if you will, based on the 3 metrics determined by the Department of Health Services. So I'd love to hear from board members on the metrics and sort of the to be determined date based on that.
Well, I think the first question would be, if you look through the metrics, there's 3 status. There's 3 metrics and there's 3 statuses to each metric. I think I'd like to know what status we expect. Red obviously is a no-go. They are offering some options, with yellow potentially being in a potential for hybrid versus green being 100% in person. How does the board feel? Where do we think we should be in order to feel safe from a color-coded metric standpoint to give the go-ahead?
I can start that, and then we can kind of go down the line. I think it is a good idea for us to look at these and abide by these metrics. They were determined as sort of the protocol from the state. That's what we asked for. And I think they put some good heads together to determine what those metrics are. I think in my personal view, it makes sense for us because we are offering already different learning styles as children come back, for us to wait until we are in the green category completely. The yellow moderate category to me is, especially in that second metric, is broad. I think it's 5 to 10% for that positivity rating. And I think, how are we going to determine where between that 5 and 10% is okay? If we stuck with that moderate, I think they averaged it on the health website at 7% or something, I think is what they did. But I would suggest that we wait until we are fully in the green category and then welcome our students back in person, still allowing the hybrid option for those parents that want to do that.
I kind of put my 2 cents in on that particular. I think one of the reasons they may have given a range, why it is a little bit more vague, is because that number, frankly, really has more dependence on who we're testing. So if we're testing largely symptomatic positive people, which is essentially what we've been doing for a long time, if anyone's tried to get tested, unless you say you're symptomatic, you couldn't get a test other than in these blitz, you're going to have a higher positive number. And that's not really reflective of anything but the fact that we're only testing positive people. So of the 3 metrics, I feel like that metric, if it's everything's green and that guy's holding out a yellow, I feel like that is not a super responsible number to hang our hat completely on. Now, if it's hanging in red, that's one thing. But if it's hanging in a range, in that yellow, I think that's something that we have to consider, because I feel like that number, unless, if people look at that number as if 12% of the population, have been tested positive for COVID, and that's not accurate at all. It's 12% of the people being tested, with a huge percentage of those symptomatic sick people. So I think that's a bit skewed. So, and it's my guess that the reason they gave that range is because that number, frankly, is not as indicative of things as those other 2 numbers are. So, I would be comfortable with giving some wiggle room on that metric, not being, because, it could very well happen that if we continue testing mostly sick people only, then that number is going to stay in the yellow for 6 months. Maybe not. I mean, I don't know that, but it just depends on how many tests are available. The more, we have an issue with having enough tests, the bigger that number is going to be, because fewer people are going to be able to be tested. And the likelihood of the people being tested being positive is going to get higher and higher. So again, I feel like we should have some wiggle room in that particular metric.
I think, to me, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's all, sort of, it hinges on the testing protocols. And right now our protocol is, if you're not symptomatic, then you don't get a test, really. I think that really goes directly to the reason why I think we should wait until we're in the green, because the state is not at the point where they're willing to change that testing strategy. And until that changes, the positivity rate is the only way that we can wait to know that we don't have a higher percentage rate overall, because we don't know, because people aren't able to get tested. And so I totally understand what you're saying, that it is a skewed number, but the reason it's a skewed number is because we don't have a testing strategy that works, in my opinion. I'm not a medical professional, so this is totally just based on, looking at numbers and statistics. So I guess that's why I agree with you, but at the same time say, they're not going to change that testing strategy. So that's our only way to make sure that
so in that vein, the most accurate number is going to be hospitalizations, because that's a true indicator of badness per se, right? I mean, that's an indicator. You can't, that is people that are sick. There's no not reporting that at this point. So, again, all the numbers are going to be skewed to some extent, but if the least skewable and the most indicative of what's really happening is going to be that third metric. So again, we have to put some value on what these numbers are telling us, not just this number we've all been watching. There's a lot of pieces to it that we frankly don't have good information. So, we get very caught up in science being black and white, the numbers, and it's so not. And so if we're talking about holding school up for months and months and months and months for a number that frankly may not have that much value, we have to look at what does that number truly tell us about actual safety. And so again, I'm not saying, oh, throw them out the window, but I'm saying that when we look at all green or all green to green for a long time and one hanging out, how valuable is that number when everything else is painting a different picture? So again, I'm just saying, I think that we need to make sure as we go forward that we're looking at the value of what those metrics truly mean and not just something to grab onto.
I will say from a personal standpoint, I believe the testing numbers are going to change because my daughter is starting at ASU. She was showing no symptoms whatsoever, and all students at ASU, NAU, and U of A are going to be tested within the next 2 weeks. So we are going to see a lot more people being tested who are not necessarily showing symptoms.
Right, which is good, which is,
Yeah.
will make the numbers more accurate by having larger amounts of asymptomatic people being tested.
Yeah. But I will also say that I value the Arizona Department of Health Services and their advice. And I feel strongly that they chose these 3 metrics out of all of the metrics potentially that would be available. If you look at the Johns Hopkins website, there are lots of metrics you can look at. They chose these 3 for a reason. And so I'm not comfortable with any of them being in the yellow for us to go back full-time in person, personally.
Melissa, Elaine, any comments from either one of you?
I agree that I think that we've been given these metrics and I don't know, like right now we're set up with our 3 different options, but I don't think we're prepared to just have hybrid kids come back if we get into yellow, and there's still a potential for us to backslide and end up back in red really fast. So I'd rather see us get into the green with all these metrics. And then, if our numbers start going up again, we deal with that at a later time, but at least we'll have more room for our kids to be in school. I don't want to see our kids in and out, in for a week and then out.
Right.
I'd rather us be firmly in the green before we start talking about the yellow area.
So one of the things that we're learning a little bit more about, but that we have a little bit of information, it could change by Thursday, but a little bit of information, is that what they've stated is that once you go, once you push go and you're in person, then that's the time it's not that we're not monitoring those numbers, but those numbers don't guide us, if that makes sense, because you're now in person. So then what would guide us is our work with the county health department if we had issues on site. Unless there was something drastic that happened in the community as a whole, where then we'd probably be hearing from the governor, or our county health department would probably be reaching out to us at that time to make a different change. But so once you go and you make that move or that shift, then you're going and you're just working with your county health department on your COVID incidents that would occur on your campus, and they would guide you of whether you would shut down a class or a grade level or a school. So I just didn't want people, because I know that was something kind of confusing, because then people thought, oh, do we have to monitor those numbers all the time and then just shut back down if they go all red? They said, no, it would be that we'd work with our county health department and continue on. So just a little clarifying piece that could change, but that's what we heard from the last.
I think that makes it even more important that we wait until we're in green for all of them then.
And I'm all green all the way.
All green all the way, was that your comment?
All green all the way.
Okay.
Then we'll go.
Okay, kind of the second piece to that, and this is more just a future planning piece, is that once, when we vote to either approve or not approve this resolution here in a moment, we are also sort of approving what the next steps from that will be. So in this resolution, we're also asking Jody to make a formal recommendation. So let's say we do hit the benchmarks that are approved tonight, or these metrics that are approved tonight. They're released every Thursday. I think we all need to be really clear that doesn't mean, Friday morning our school is opening up, or even potentially Monday morning our school is just going to open up and things are just going to go right back to normal. There is a process that is going to have to go through. So Jody will sort of come back to us with another sort of reopening plan of what that actually would look like, what that timeline will look like, right? Logistics, communication to our families and our parents is vital, right? It's crucial to make sure that they have enough time to plan for sort of that reentry and transportation and childcare and all of those kinds of things. Also, our teachers will need to switch gears and, be ready to teach their kids in person or hybrid in person at that point in time. So while we are, I think, in somewhat agreement on using the metrics, just want to be really clear that that doesn't mean we will immediately open schools. There will be a second step where the staff will come back with a very specific recommendation. The board will have the chance to review it at that time and determine what we're going to do from there. So there's a second piece to this that will have to be approved at some other time down the road once we get closer to what those metrics being in a better place with each one of those metrics. Okay, any other final comments, discussion, question? Okay, then I will entertain a motion for possible action on the resolution.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I move that we approve the possible action on resolution as set forth in the governor's orders resolution. I don't even know how to say it. That's why I don't ever do this.
I second.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you.
Just to clarify, you are making a motion to approve the resolution as written with the, I'm just clarifying if this is not
Oh,
what
no,
you
I'm
said,
glad
please.
you're doing
Okay. Approve the resolution as written with the sort of clarifying terms on the metrics being in all green before we
green.
open. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And
Yes.
Tanya, you second that motion. Okay.
All
Perfect.
green all the way.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm clarifying that for
Got it,
everybody.
got it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on the motion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Okay. 15B, consideration of approval of Arizona School Risk Retention Trust endorsement. Number 10, COVID-19 liability coverage and COVID-19 parental acknowledgement and disclosure form. Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would approve this additional coverage to our current trust coverage that we have for liability, and that you would approve the use of the parent acknowledgement form to be utilized and shared with all of our students.
Okay, I will open the floor on comments, discussion. I'd like to break it up if we could. So let's first have comments and discussion on the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust endorsement. That would cover any of the policy, costs, et cetera, that's listed here in board docs. No comments or discussion.
No discussion.
Here, everybody is good with this. So just to recap for those folks that are listening here, this is a endorsement that would be in addition to our current insurance policy that would allow coverage for COVID-related cases. It is an added expense to the district on top of the policy, insurance policy that we currently carry. Okay, well then we on to the parental acknowledgement and disclosure form that you can see also as well on your board docs. Discussion, comments.
And for me.
I will say that I appreciate that the acknowledgement form puts the responsibility of symptom checking and doing that on a daily basis in the hands of the parents. That's something that is going to be critical to going back to in-person.
Okay, I'd like to make some clarifying statements if I can. I know there's some the information in board docs for those folks that are following along with us about the coverage and what the acknowledgement form means or doesn't mean in terms of our deductible and coverage and things like that. But I do want to be really clear about what this form is and what this form isn't. So, and Jody, please jump in, right? If I say anything incorrectly or just as we review this really quickly. This acknowledgement form will be sent to parents, all parents who have children that are on our campus. Students or otherwise, if they're on our campus for any reason, they would be asked to sign this acknowledgement form. This acknowledgement form does not waive their rights or anything like that, but it does, as Kim mentioned, sort of put the onus of symptom checking and making sure that they are, making sure that their child are free of those symptoms before sending them to school. And the symptoms are listed on here and things like that. So it just kind of goes through a checklist of responsibility of both the parent and the families and the district as well. So I think that is important. This would be required for any student coming back. So we do have students right now that will start next week in the on-site learning program that was required by the governor. This will also be required for students that will come back at the to be determined date. Not sure what that is per our discussion a moment ago in terms of when the metrics are met and when the superintendent has made the recommendation for the board to decide if we're going back to school. This will basically be good for the remainder of the school year for 2020, 2021 school year. From what I understand, this will be required of all students. And if parents do not want to sign it and are uncomfortable signing that, we understand they'll be placed in our digital learning academy. And they will not have to be back on campus if they are uncomfortable signing this. Is there anything else that, just as an overview, that I've missed, or any comments or suggestions on anything of that? No? Okay.
I have a question about, because we had talked about the waiver and a waiver for staff students or staff children. Is that something that we are going to be also voting to require now as well, or?
We wouldn't have, it's not present. And remember, they're still working on that. So
Okay.
that would have to come at a future meeting.
Yeah, and I think, and just to clarify too, that is kind of the visitor waiver. So that would be kids that are not students of the district. I know right now we're not allowing visitors, but if that ever were to change, that would also be included in that. So if they're children that are younger than what our typical student would be, or older, or not part of our district, or any other visitors that might be allowed at a future date, they would need to sign that. I think that's still being worked on, right, by the trust at this point in time. So we don't have that here, but that will come at a later date. So right now the acknowledgement form will go for everyone. And then if there's a secondary form that comes for our approval, we can decide at that point in time if we want to require that or not. So I just want to make sure that we understand by approving this measure, we are approving both the fee and coverage of the COVID endorsement by the trust. And we also will be approving the requirement for a parental acknowledgement and disclosure form beginning immediately, effective upon our approval. That will be good for the remainder of the school year.
Okay, sorry. One more
No,
thing
go
then.
ahead. I want people to
Since
ask
we're
questions.
not doing
so
the
this is a big
waiver now
deal.
for our kids that are currently on our campus, we have staff kids that are on campus right now. And by the time we come back to a meeting, that'll be a month from now. Are we going to make them all, they're all going to sign this form then for their kids in order to be on campus right now? And if they don't sign this, then their kids will not be allowed to be on campus right now.
I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to look at Jody just to make sure that when I say yes, that that is actually the correct answer. So yes, if,
So our plan was to have the acknowledgement form to be signed for any child that would be on campus at this time. And then we would just have to work with if there was somebody who wasn't willing or, but this is kind of the stuff that they've all committed to anyway, as well. And then I know also, in addition, we'll receive further guidance from the trust on kind of what are the next steps for those other pieces that I know they're working on.
and I just want to be really clear too, just actually to clarify for myself, as well as everyone listening, there is a difference between an acknowledgement form and a waiver. So the acknowledgement form does not require you to waive your rights or anything like that. This acknowledgement form, as you can see, if anyone's following along with us, just requires people to acknowledge the risk and acknowledge that they are going to do their part in monitoring symptoms, and that they will know that they'll be required to, come and pick up their child if they're sick and, be responsible for those types of things. It also requires, the district are going to follow our safety protocols and follow our mitigation plan and do what we're supposed to do to make sure that we are reducing risk and taking, those critical steps to make sure everybody is safe. So I think it works on both sides, but I just want to make sure that I know there's been a lot in the news media and other things going around about waivers and different things. So I just want to make sure that what is being recommended here, both by our legal counsel as well as the superintendent and the district administration, is not a waiver. It is a parental acknowledgement form that is here, which is, different from someone who's being asked to waive their rights altogether.
So along the same line, so as Jennifer said, similar to, what you sign when you do a sports, when you're involved in sports, or if you're involved in a field trip or something outside of the norm, that's kind of, so again, like you said, not waiving everything, just acknowledging that there's risk involved, essentially, and your part in mitigating that.
Correct. And also, if parents are or families are uncomfortable signing this, that those will be, handled on an individual basis, and they will be offered, a position in our digital learning academy so that their child can continue learning and continue accessing the curriculum until they are comfortable coming back and signing this. Okay. Any other comments or discussion? I know this is, seems like there are still changes yet to come in terms of what this might mean for certain populations that would be on our campus in the future. So I think we'll probably have further discussions about this, but as we're, considering approval tonight, are there any other comments or questions about either the endorsement piece or the acknowledgement piece?
My only other comment is I do think that it's important that we approve this now from a liability standpoint, knowing that we will have an increased number of students on our campus starting on Monday. That's really the purpose of this, is to mitigate our liability somewhere between, the 0 to the 20,000, per occurrence.
Okay. Yes, and also I want to be really clear that I think, we are parents up here. We have kids that are either currently in the district or have been in the district before, and I think this is a very very tough thing to do, and not a position that any of us want to be in. I think our position as board members is certainly to assess and mitigate risk for the district. That's our job. And we also need to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can with our reopening plan and our mitigation plan to make sure those risks are minimized, so that when we do have staff and students of any kind on our campus, we're doing all we can. And I think that's what this form does for me, because it not only tells the parents the risk that they're acknowledging, but it also requires that the district do their part in terms of safety protocols and mitigation plans and things like that. So I want to make sure that those two things are working in partnership to make sure this is the safest place that our children can be. Although we know there's no place that's risk-free, unfortunately. Okay, so with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve Arizona School Risk Retention Trust endorsement number 10, COVID-19 liability coverage and COVID-19 parental acknowledgement and disclosure form as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Kim and Melissa. Any further comments or discussion before we vote? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposition, motion carries. Okay. 15E, face coverings amendment added to the 2021 employee handbook. We have Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you approve the face covering amendment to our employee handbook as stated or as presented. This would help us in meeting the executive order put forth by our governor in regards to face covering required on campuses.
Okay, I will start by saying that I am in favor of all of our staff, wearing face coverings, not only for their safety, but for folks around them. As I know right now, we don't have students on campus, but we do have staff, and we will have additional students on campus on the 17th. And I think it's imperative that we continue to make the requirement, because we need sort of that strategy in place to require our employees to do this, no matter their personal feelings on the matter. As a district, we've decided that this is part of our mitigation strategy, and we need everyone to be a participant in that. Any comments or questions? Okay. What this also does, just so that I can be clear, and Jody, I'm saying this for you to clarify for me, is with it now being added to the handbook in terms of, for employees, and we will probably do the same, I'm assuming, to the student handbook or update those policies as we get to that point. It becomes from it. We're leaving sort of, you're encouraged to do this, and sort of you're required by the Maricopa County statute or whatever. But now it is, you are required to do this. And if you don't, there would be, I don't know what the right term is in terms of a protocol that would happen after that. But it is serious enough that we're requiring people to do it per the handbook. And then if they're not, there will be discussion afterwards of why that wasn't done.
Correct. So with something being in the handbook, just like any of our policies and procedures, corrective action steps could be taken if someone was not adhering to the guidelines.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I think that's important for a lot of our staff to feel safe on campus and to feel that not only the board, but the administration is, taking that those safety precautions very seriously. So we want to make sure that staff are doing this unless they're obviously in their classroom by themselves and able to socially distance. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I'm going to try this one more time. Are you ready? Here we go. I move to approve the face covering amendment added to the 2020-2021 employee handbook as presented. Hey, I know, right?
I second.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Elaine and Melissa. If there's not any last minute comments or questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No opposition, motion carries. Okay. We are on item 15F, voluntary pandemic furlough program. We are back to Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we would ask that you would consider implementing or approving a voluntary pandemic furlough program. What this program would allow us to do is, if we don't feel like we're in need of it just this moment, but if for some reason that we were to shut down even into a further setting, this would allow for employees of certain groups that they could take a voluntary furlough, which would mean that they could take basically an unpaid leave. So just provide another option for folks if they weren't in need of if we didn't need them for a job at that specific time.
Okay. Thank you. I will open the floor for comments or questions for Jody.
You know, I think this is a good program, Jody. I know that you and I had talked early on about concerns for classified, and we know that that's where my heart lies. And I think that it's very honorable to allow these people to take a step back, apply for unemployment as they would be qualified for, and then return back to a job that they love. And I think that's really the best thing that we can do if we cannot afford to keep them. It's really a win-win for everyone I see.
Thank you.
I agree. I think it's a great program. We have talked, both online here and in some of our previous meetings, as well as offline, I think independently with Jody, that everyone on this board is as committed as we possibly can be to keeping everyone employed and our district properly staffed and taking care of our district family members. However, we also know that we don't know what's in front of us, and we may, come on times that are much harder than what we're sitting in right now. And I think having a voluntary program that allows people to access, healthcare and the resources they need from the district, but also take a step back and, potentially be eligible for state and federal, assistance and unemployment, it's great. It certainly wouldn't be required at this point, but having it voluntary, I think, sets us up to have this ready to pull off the shelf if we get into a place where we actually need it. So I think it's a great program as well. Any other comments or questions?
No, just to clarify, we are not right now needing this program. It's just so that in the future, if there might be a need, we have that in place so that people are not freaking out.
Correct.
Who might see this on an agenda and
Correct.
be like, oh no. So,
We actually need all of our employees right now, especially with all the different options and things that we're doing. So yes, it's critical that we have them right now, but if it would be something for in the future, if needed.
I think the critical word in the document is voluntary furlough program. So it's not, even though the word furlough can be scary, the fact that it's voluntary and that it's temporary, if you didn't read the dates, it's only going to be in effect as a possibility as it currently stands, if approved, until December of this year.
Yeah, but I think, Melissa, your point is well taken. Right now, people are very sensitive to that language in general, voluntary or not. So yeah, I'm happy to set the record straight. We are not asking anyone to participate in a furlough program on any means. This is contingency planning at its best. This is what we expect our district staff to be doing, to be ready at any moment if something were to happen and we needed to offer this to employees. We now have a legal avenue for them to do so. So this is just us planning on having plan B, C, and D on the shelf in case it's necessary. So with that, I will make a motion to approve the voluntary pandemic furlough program as presented.
I have a second.
Nice, thank you, ladies. If there's not any continuing conversation, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, before we move on to the next item about approving board goals, we're sort of finishing up the COVID-related portion of our action discussion items. I realize it is 9:42, and if there is anyone still watching, thank you. These are really heavy decisions. These are decisions that have been calculated over time and lots of questions and board reports and statistics and all of that kind of stuff. So thank you for your patience and, riding along with us with this kind of extended agenda. But all of these things, these conversations are imperative for us to have here open in the public so that we can, you know, be transparent with our community and what we're doing. And it's a lot for all of us, but we appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations with you. If not in person, at least on YouTube. So, okay, we will move forward now with item 15G, approving our governing board goals for the 2021 school year. And looks like I will be presenting that. So as we mentioned earlier in our governing board reports, we participated in a board retreat over the summer. And the purpose of this retreat, there was myriad different things that we talked about, but one of the things in our self-evaluation was developing a set of board goals that would align with both our district strategic plan as well as Superintendent Gunning's sort of annual scorecard and her goals that she is evaluated on twice a year. We really felt like as a board, we needed to have goals for ourselves and set these, goals and objectives for us to really put into place for this year and continue that process year after year. So if you kind of will open the scorecard and look there are 4 goals that are being proposed. These were whittled down over probably a dozen or 2 that we started with. And as Kim mentioned earlier, we can be a chatty group and we all have things that are near and dear to our heart in terms of getting things done. But one thing we needed to do is we needed to take a step back and realize that as a board, we don't need to be making operational or management level goals, because those are things on Jody's scorecard, and that's for her to manage and be evaluated on. But these goals were more for ourselves in creating board norms and board processes that we can continue year over year. And these were the 4 that we landed on. So I would like to present these 4 goals to the board for approval tonight. And I believe we'll continue that process of the action plans of how we're going to approve them in the next agenda item. So any comments or questions on these boards as goals, as presented? Looks like so little.
Doesn't it though?
I'm like, oh, looks like nothing. There's discussion.
Have discussion, that's true. No, I have no questions or comments.
Okay, perfect. Yes, it did take a long time to whittle down to these 4 little goals. And while they, the number may seem smaller than we started with, I think, they are good for us to start in our first year in this format in terms of the scorecard and really trying to align ourselves better with our superintendent and our overall district scorecard and strategic plan. So with that, I will motion to approve the governing board goals as presented.
I will second.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, ladies. If there's no other discussion or comments, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We are getting very close to the end. Let's see, 15H, discussion and possible adoption of action plans related to governing board goals for 2021. I'll just quickly go through this just for those watching the process that we went through with these goals, creating SMART goals. If you've ever been in a company or an organization that puts together SMART goals, with that, there is an action plan for each goal of who's going to do what and in what time frame and what milestones in order to reach that goal. So I present 4 action plans, 1 for each goal. And as you will see here on our board document, they have the person sort of who is responsible sort of shepherded that action plan or help us put that together. Even we did them collectively, but was independently responsible for doing that. So while it's not required necessarily to adopt these, I think it's important for, again, we have a sort of underlying board goal of transparency. And sometimes we can make really big goals and then forget how to get there. So I want to be held accountable to our community, to Jody and the staff, as we hold them accountable and say, these are our action plans. These are the dates that we intend to complete these things. And this is, what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. So I would hope that we would all agree on these action plans and adopt them this evening. Any comments or suggestions on the specific action plans?
I have a question. Do we have flexibility in adapting the action plans? Let's say we get to an action step that we're supposed to complete in January and we need to add something to that. Like how set in stone are these action plans?
Yes, I would say, I mean, the goals are not, the action plans would be, open. I'm not sure if we need to bring them back. If we change them, yes, we would need to bring them back. If we adopt them this evening, if we make changes to them, we would just bring them back at that time and make that change to it, whether it's a date or a,
So that sounds kind of administratively heavy. So if it's not required to adopt the action plans, do we want to consider these just being working documents that we would go towards our goal? Or I see there potentially needing to be some tweaks happening here. So it's a lot of information to say, because it's not a policy. It does seem to me more like a working document, but happy to discuss.
I agree. I think that we have a lot of things that we do have to do in our meetings. And if, I'm not saying this isn't important, we definitely keep it in our minds of what we're trying to do, but having it be more of a living document that can change and adapt as we need it to might be easier for us than having to come back to a meeting to make a change in it.
in the action plan. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Tanya, Elaine, agreement in that.
I agree.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I will just say the purpose of bringing them here, Kim, I think your point is valid, right? We don't want to create more administrative work than we need to. My point and putting them on there and sort of creating this discussion was purely out of transparency of our process and accountability for us as a board. So I think that has been achieved. So that's good news. So what I would suggest, then I guess I'll entertain a motion to table. I'm not sure. Amy, I'm looking to you for help. I apologize. If we table this, I'm just procedurally question, vote not to approve, but they're still valid, or table. None of the above. Okay.
If you don't adopt them, then they aren't. That's part of, remember Nikki said.
She never said we had to approve the action plans, only that we had to approve the goals, that the action plans were not necessary to be approved, was my understanding.
Well, then we don't have to approve them.
We could for now table it, get clarification on that. That's right. We could for now table,
Okay.
get clarification on if the action plans have to be approved by the board, or if they are in fact more like a working document or a supporting document to the goals.
Okay, I can take on that task. So then that's good. Okay, so I'll entertain
It's
him.
in the verbiage is what I'm thinking too.
Say that one more time.
So I was thinking maybe it's in the verbiage of what you're approving, like when you take it back and ask Nikki, because maybe it is that, because then you want to make sure, because I mean, I know you all know because you guys were all a part of it, but then that gives clarity too, that everybody agrees with, yes, this is what we actually came up with as our action steps. So maybe it's more like that, like this is what we came up with, but we know it's a working document that kind of like the LASD reopening plan.
Right.
It's an
Okay.
ever-changing
Resolution,
document.
right.
So I think maybe that's
Okay.
might be, so get, when you
Yeah.
ask for it,
Clarity
I
on
think-
that verbiage. Okay. Yeah. I think that sounds like a good
Then
idea.
for next steps from her summary, it said the board will meet to discuss and adopt goals and action plans.
Okay. Then I will. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am motioning that we table the adoption this evening of the action plans related to our governing board goals until further clarification of how to properly agendize this with being able to make changes and getting that verbiage. I will take on that task. So I move that we table this until further information and clarity can be had.
I second.
I have a question before we vote on that.
Okay, discussion, go ahead.
Yes,
Melissa.
so if we table that, are we still able to work on it if we have to come back to this later? Because we have dates that we want to meet by our next meeting for number 3, which we all have already worked on. So, I mean, if we want to approve that one, I would be more comfortable approving goal number 3 right now, the action plan, because we all worked, I mean, we kind of worked on that. Just so
I
that we
maybe
can hit our
speaking out of
dates.
turn. No, I understand exactly what you're saying because we're about to talk about that next. We've approved the board goals.
So it doesn't matter.
We can achieve that goal however we want. I don't necessarily, because we're tabling the action plan. I don't think we have to do that. We'll come back later, but in the next item, we'll sort of approve those sort of next steps for 3. But no, I think that's a good clarification just to make sure, because we do have some immediate action steps that need to be taken. So, okay, any further questions or comments? No. Okay, all those in favor? Oh, excuse me. Motion on the table is to table until further clarity, just to reiterate. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the last item on our agenda. It is 16A, discussion of governing board goal number 3, minimum requirements for report structure. This is discussion info only. So I will kind of set this up and then we can kind of dive into our conversation. So as a board, the goal was to create a report structure that outlines the minimum requirements necessary for presentations as presented to the board for board action. So this evening, we do not have to vote or anything like that. This is basically a first read, okay? So we all submitted different things, and you can see here on your board docs what those things were. Let me pull that up. And so we can have discussion on any items on here already that if anyone disagrees with, let's have that conversation. If there's anything in addition to that we have decided in the last couple of days since these have been added that we'd like to put on there, we can do that as well. Once this discussion concludes, it will come back for basically a second read and adoption during our next meeting in September. So we will have a sort of a second go at it once we've had a little bit of time to think about it once we have this discussion. So with that, I will, I present to you the items here listed in your board docs. It is, broken up into executive summary type items, detailed support, and also there was a suggestion or 2 made in terms of creating a standard PowerPoint template for the district. So every department that comes to us would, basically just have that same thing. It would sort of be that part of that structured template. So I will open up the floor for comments on any of those minimum requirements that are listed here.
I'll jump in first. I agree with all of the areas where we all pretty much gave the same idea of what we would like to see in this. I do think that the time limit is something that should be listed on there. It looks like maybe I'm the only one who may have said that I would like to know the time limit. And I'm not so sure about a standard PowerPoint. I mean, I do kind of understand wanting to streamline everything, but I really think we've got a lot of creative people here, and I like to see some nice things that are a little bit different. Like if we just say, this is all it has to be, does this mean they can't put in the video here or show these pictures there,
No, I don't think that's what that means. I think what it means is that you would have a template in terms of it would have the district logo and the district colors, and the template itself would be the same.
Able to put in their own creative spin on everything.
Absolutely, the content and
Like a rubric.
Okay.
well, I mean, in terms of the PowerPoint template, it literally would be just PowerPoint slides. They would then add whatever content they wanted to on top of that.
Okay.
These minimum requirements would be sort of in addition to that. I think those are 2 separate things that that we're requesting here. So, I mean, in terms of the minimum requirements, Elaine, you were saying the timeline of the project or item is very
If
important to you.
applicable, if applicable, yeah, applicable.
Elaine and
sure.
I did our list when we were working on our other one, so yes, I also, that's not.
Okay.
I don't know if
Yay.
the top parts too.
Yay.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else have any comments or anything that are extremely important to them, on this list, or anything that wasn't captured?
Could we say that the PowerPoint should be in Google Slides as opposed to sometimes getting a Word PowerPoint that we open up? or, thank you. Yeah, Microsoft. Just throwing that out there. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just sort of thinking through what that might look like. I think that we might leave that to someone at the district to create what that template is like in whatever
Right.
format works best for them. I don't know if that would be PowerPoint or Google Slides. I don't know what they use, so I don't know that we would need to tell them what program it is as long as it's consistent. But yeah, one other piece that actually brings up a good point. Part of this process too, when it was designed of kind of first read, second read, is after this discussion, obviously there's staff and administrators watching this, and Jody will be able to sort of take this back to them. They are the department heads and the coordinators and the executive directors that are the ones that are coming to us, month over month with these, these pieces of information. So part of this review process and feedback loop is Jody going back to the staff and saying, okay, this is sort of the board's expectations. What is your feedback? What are your ideas, and what's not really possible? What can we do?
What
do you
doesn't
think is
make
really
sense for them, and
important,
yada,
right?
yada.
So
Okay.
Jody, I think you'll be able to close that feedback loop for us next time if there's things on here that either don't make sense or would make it extremely difficult for staff to comply with this board request. Okay, anything in the detailed support? Obviously, I think it goes without saying, not all of these are going to be applicable for every single report. Obviously, there's going to be some financial pieces or other parts of that would not necessarily be, our budget documents I'm thinking of, right? I mean, those are very intense and long and would have a lot more minimum requirements than something else. So I think these are high level enough that, people could utilize the information here where applicable. Another thing I think is important, I think we've seen, unfortunately, with the closure and the quarantine since March, we haven't really been able to see it. But I know last year we started to see some of our committees and teachers and coaches and principals come and present at meetings. And, it's my hope that we'll get back to that, right, at some point in time, that as much as I love Superintendent Gunning and Gina and Megan, I think, they get a lot of their information from, committees and staff that they tap to do that work. And I think at Litchfield, we've done a really good job. And when I say we, I mean Jody and her staff have done a really good job of cultivating leadership within. And part of doing that is being able to not only put together the information and the recommendation, but then present it to the board and defend it. I think that's a really important piece of that. So my hope is that these won't be looked at as, oh my gosh, this is just more requirements that the board is, forcing on us. But instead to your point, Tanya, like a rubric, something that somebody can look at and, come in here for the very first time for a board presentation and know exactly what we're expecting, not be caught off guard with questions that they weren't expecting, and really be set up for success in front of us, at that meeting. Because I'd love to see more of those individual voices being heard. And I'm hopeful that this will, give them sort of a step up to, knowing what we're thinking, especially if they don't present to us on a regular basis. So any questions, or you're about to
I was just
say
gonna,
something?
So just to clarify, am I taking all of these back, even the ones that didn't have a number next to them, to get feedback from our
Yes.
staff? Okay.
I would. Is there anyone else that feels differently? Okay.
Well, I think some of them are kind of duplicated, so maybe we could condense them, or they have a similar sentiment. I mean, the whole purpose behind an executive summary is to make it short and summarized. And we have a lot of questions, and maybe we can't. Maybe this is as summarized as we could get, because like the comment raw or compiled or summarized data used to make recommendation. Well, that could be 1 page, that could be 10 pages of information. So, yeah, when you say raw, so yeah, I think some of these could be word tweaked. I don't know if we want to do that as a group, or I think there could be some consolidation of these that would get us the same information, but would reduce the number of questions that we have on here right now. So in my mind, there'd be an executive summary, which is what we get on some of the recommendations that we get today. And then the detailed support would show the detail behind that. So for example, when I read an article in the Journal of Accountancy, there's an executive summary that has like 4 or 5 bullet points. And that's how I envision this executive summary looking. And then the detailed support needs to be what's included in the PowerPoint presentation, the financial and everything that's going to support everything that's in the executive summary. And then for me personally, I suggested the PowerPoint presentation, kind of a standard template, because, we have this new style guide. We're trying to polish our look. We're trying to be cohesive with our language that we're using and be commonplace with that. And I think having a standard look to our presentation, possibly something similar to how our new website looks, would just add to that level of professionalism when it comes to presentations from internal stakeholders to the board.
I agree. As a marketing professional, I think it is extremely important, just, on a professional level to have that look. And I think the information that our board, that the district staff recommends and puts together is professional. It is top notch always, right? I mean, I think we were always very appreciative of the information that we get. So, utilizing some sort of, district template just sort of creates that look and feel that everything is very in brand for Litchfield as we move forward, as we continue to evolve that brand. Yeah, Kim, I would totally agree. Some of these things might be, I don't know about redundant, but definitely could be shrunk down. I think the raw or compiled or summarized data used to make recommendations, I think that's extremely important, but I think that should fall under detailed support. Raw data numbers are definitely not executive summary. I am unfortunately not in the millennial category, but for all the millennials out there, this is the, TLDR version on the executive summary. So, moving some of those bigger items that we know are going to take up more time and space should be moved down to that detailed support. And again, some of those, to me, the executive summary should be able to fit any scenario. The detailed support is going to be where it's, if applicable, or if that makes sense. You might not have raw data when we're talking about, specific things. So yeah, I would be in agreement that would move down. And I would like to see, Jody, I think this list is somewhat manageable. So I'd like to see you take back all of this and just get feedback on it before we remove anything. With that noted, that we'd move down sort of that data piece to detailed support. And, I'm anxious to hear what their feedback would be as the ones who are putting this together, but.
The committee could be moved down too. I think the committee information that also really is in the detail support. And I feel like that does directly impact our students. Yeah, I think it could be summarized, but Jody, you can do that.
Yeah, I think we could probably take the raw data line, the committee line, the impact to students, and have we done this in the past? I think we could probably move those to detailed support and leave the employee, team, or department responsible. Obviously, I think that's part of the summary of who is making this recommendation and why kind of piece. But I think we could probably move those down. Again, we're still taking all of this. It's, moving it one place doesn't mean that it's not happening. It just sort of makes it, maybe a little bit easier in terms of evaluating what this rubric or template would look like. So, okay. Any other revisions or changes to this as we see it today? We'll have, again, a second chance to look at this, as well as Jody getting some staff feedback for us at the second read in September. Okay, perfect. Well, with that, thank you ladies very much, and gentlemen here for our IT needs. We appreciate you hanging on with us. This was a very important meeting. We got a lot accomplished. There's a lot of conversation that's very important. There's a lot going on, and we take it extremely seriously. None of these decisions are easy for us to make, or easy for us to pull information together to make these decisions without knowing they're going to change in another 24, 48 hours, it feels like. So thanks everyone for hanging in there with us. We really appreciate it. And with that,
I motion to adjourn.
I
thank
second.
you, Melissa. Thank you, Elaine. We appreciate that. I don't think there is any discussion required. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.